Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with part 19, Speculative Masonry of the Origin of Freemasonry and Knights Templar by John R. Bennett. Speculative Masonry. There were now two Grand Masters in England who assumed distinctive titles, the Grand Master of the North being called Grand Master of all England, while he who presided in the South was called Grand Master of England. In the beginning of the 18th century, Masonry in the south of England had fallen into decay. The disturbances of the Revolution, which placed William III on the throne in 1689, and the subsequent warmth of political feelings, gave the order a wound fatal to its success. Sir Christopher Wren, long active as a master builder and Grand Master in the reign of Queen Anne, 1702 through 1714, the last of his royal patrons, had become aged, infirm, and inactive, and hence the general assemblies of the Grand Lodge had ceased to take place. In 1715 there were but 4 lodges in the south of England, and all working in the city of London. These lodges, being desirous of reviving the prosperity of the order, determined to unite themselves under a new Grand Master and revive the communications and annual feast of the society. They, therefore, met at the Apple Tree Tavern and constituted themselves a Grand Lodge, pro tempore, in due form. They resolved to hold the annual assembly and feast, and then to choose a Grand Master from among themselves. Accordingly, on St. John the Baptist Day, June 24, in 1717, the annual assembly and feast was held, and Mr. Anthony Sayer was duly proposed and elected Grand Master. A statute was enchanted which entirely changed the objects of the institution. From an operative society, it became wholly speculative in its character. It ceased to build material temples and devoted itself to the erection of a spiritual one. It retained the working tools and technical terms of art of the original operative institution, simply because of the religious symbolism which these conveyed. They became the Freemasons of the present day and established on an imperishable foundation that sublime institution which presents all the habitable earth the most wonderful system of religious and moral symbolism that the world ever saw. The Grand Lodges of York and London kept up a friendly intercourse and mutual interchange of recognition until 1725, when dissensions arose from encroachment upon territory, causing opposition to each other, and in 1735 all friendly intercourse ceased. From that time the York Masons considered their interests distinct from the Masons under the Grand Lodge in London. 3 years after, in 1738, several brethren, dissatisfied with the conduct of the Grand Lodge of England, seceded from it and held unauthorized meetings for the purpose of initiation. Taking advantage of the breach between the Grand Lodges of York and London, they assumed the character of the York Masons. On the Grand Lodge's determination to put strictly in execution the laws against such seceders, they still further separated from its jurisdiction and assumed the appellation of Ancient York Masons. They announced that the ancient landmarks were alone preserved by them, and declaring that the regular lodges had adopted new plans and sanctioned innovations, they branded them with the name of Modern Masons. In 1739, they established a new Grand Lodge in London under the name of Grand Lodge of Ancient York Masons, and preserving in the measures they had adopted, held communications and appointed annual feast. They were soon after recognized by the Masons of Scotland and Ireland, and were encouraged and fostered by many of the nobility. the two Grand Lodges continued to exist and to act in opposition to each other, extending their schisms into other countries, especially into America, until the year 1813, when, under the Grand Mastership of the Duke of Sussex for the moderns and his brother, the Duke of Kent for the ancients, they were united under the title United Grand Lodge of England. The Grand Lodge of all England at York continued to work until 1792, when it finally collapsed. Such is the history of Freemasonry in England as conceded by all Masons and Masonic writers for the past 2 centuries, is spread in other countries with more or less activity. For through the instrumentality of the Grand Lodge of England, which became, indeed, the Mother Lodge of the world, Freemasonry was everywhere revived. Lodges on the English model, which afterwards gave rise to the establishment of Grand Lodges in the respective countries, were organized in France in 1727, in Holland in 1731, in Germany in 1733, and in Italy in 1735. Freemasonry was established in America at Boston, Massachusetts in the year 1733. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.